The horrors of the storage are left behind, but do not forget the fact that a much worse entity is about to catch up. The Guardian announces its presence with a threatening growl, loud and clear, as if impatiently waiting for Daniel to stop playing around in the storage. Fleshy residue has appeared from the archive tunnels, slowly following Daniel's footsteps. The ambiance has degraded to a similar haunting atmosphere as heard in an old archives section, where Daniel first recovered his lantern. The peculiar fountain has also suffered a change. I did not give this bizarre structure any mention earlier, but it's better late than never, right? The fountain is referred to as a fountain of youth. The lore of such named fountains is that their water restores youth to those who drink or bathe in it. Despite their fantasy property, the design is very curious of this one. It looks like something out of the weirdest of dreams. The design alone could make anyone question if the back hall truly is a safe place, as it feels a bit out of place in the warm and friendly environment. If you walk up to the fountain, Daniel may bathe his hands in the water, possibly drink from it or put some on his face to freshen up after the hot pursuit in the archive tunnels. As for present time, the Guardian's presence has made a grotesque fountain even worse, as if it was not creepy enough to begin with. The fountain, along with the water design on the ground next to it, is now filled with blood. This could be due to the corpse which now resides in there. The Guardian sometimes spits out whole corpses into this dimension. Maybe all that grotesque flesh that's growing everywhere stems from those who fell victim to the Guardian up through time. Upon approaching the downgraded fountain, Daniel receives a flashback, but at an odd timing. Usually, Daniel's flashback corresponds to a certain area or upon seeing something familiar. Herbert ensures that Daniel keeps his belongings with him and strongly encourages him to respect the unflinching African sun.
Don't forget your bag, Daniel.
I won't, Herbert.
There is no shame in using a parasol in the desert. As it happens, it's imperative to your survival.
But it looks ridiculous.
The shade will hurt much less than dying, I assure you.
The section for elevator maintenance has so far avoided the Guardian's influence, although you will hear some very faint roars emitting through the walls every now and then, as if the Guardian really is outside the castle, as the machine room is a more protected inner area. Maybe the giant roaring monsters gaze through the windows and cracks aid in spotting the fleshy residue. All lights are lit up and the place seems relatively welcoming. Bugs can sometimes be seen crawling all over Daniel's vision, although this is most likely just a hallucination, similar to how a swarm of cockroaches would appear out of nowhere in the start of the game, only to entirely vanish a second or two later. The top room is primarily for elevator pressure control. On a desk, you will finally find another one of Daniel's journal entries. Picking up from the euphoria of having assembled the orb, Daniel seeks more information. As hinted by an earlier entry initially documenting the original expedition, Daniel suspects that Herbert knew about the orb beforehand and had done some research. Daniel craves to learn more about this mysterious artifact. Daniel was made aware that the geologist who was visited earlier had passed away. Daniel starts to suspect he may have had something to do with it, but shrugged it off, as he was not yet aware that the Guardian slowly followed Daniel's footsteps, killing anyone in its path, or at least those having assisted Daniel in some way.
5th of July, 1839. Today I went to the university looking for answers.
I was able to sneak into Herbert's office and pick up an address book along with some relevant textbooks. Professor Taylor at the Faculty of History was very helpful, and I managed to approach the subject of the orbs. The most interesting aspect was the prevalent trace they had left in our culture. The mythic orbs may, in fact, have inspired the globus cruciger, which so many royal regalia holds to this day. In ancient times, the orbs were held by priests as a symbol of the sun and its power. As I was leaving, I overheard a disturbing conversation. Sir William Smith, the geologist, was killed last night. Less than a fortnight had passed since I'd asked for his expertise. I know it's silly, but I can't help feeling responsible somehow.
There are a lot of pipes going absolutely everywhere, bringing memories of an old Windows operating system screensaver. Descending towards the heart of the machine, you will find a room to your left. This is the flow control room, the home of 3 mechanical rods.
This shouldn't be.
The correct rod order is marked with a symbol corresponding with the name of each rod. Trinity for triangle, circle for cycle, and 4-face for 4 edges, more commonly known as a square. The note next to the apparatus explains the current state of repairability. There are only 2 spare parts left, so instead of throwing away worn rods, they should be restored as much as possible instead of replaced entirely, as is too often the case now with today's society. There is also a journal entry to be found in here explaining how over the course of 9 days, Daniel has read through a lot of literature, looking for answers. He has reached out to many of Herbert's contacts. Alexander, Baron of Brennenburg Castle, conjures a very short response, being the most interesting, yet ominous of them all. Daniel prepares for his journey, but still believes it's for curiosity's sake only. This is about to change.
14th of July, 1839. I've read every book I can find on the subject. While rich in legend and hearsay, my knowledge is lack for the insight I crave. I've sent letters to many in Herbert's address book and received answers of varying importance. Today, I got one which differed greatly from the others. From a baron in Prussia. He said nothing about the quaint stories of priests in underground temples. He didn't even mention them. He simply wrote, "I know. I can protect you. Come to Brennenburg Castle. Signed, Alexander." What am I to make of this? Protect me from what? Is someone after me? I looked up Brennenburg and traced it to the Prussian woods near the Baltic Sea. While being the least informative letter I've received, it causes me greatest distress and interest. As I write, my thoughts are drawn to my nightmares in which a most disturbing sound calls to me. A sound defying description. A voice from the void. The last few weeks have been awful, with so many sleepless nights dreading a repeat of those horrid dreams. Tomorrow, I shall visit my physician, Dr. Tate, in hope that he can provide me with sedatives to help me sleep.
While writing his journal, Daniel becomes troubled and hears the Guardian attempting to communicate, as if scolding Daniel for planning this trip. The pressure control needs to utilize all levers, with a total value of 8 being present both up and down.
That taste, that fragrance, Damascus rose.
The heart and core of the machinery is in the lowest level, also featuring the only lamps which are not lit. Before the burner can ignite, it needs coal. 3 cogwheels are missing from the mechanism before the elevator may operate. Apart from the one found in this room, the 2 remaining cogwheels reside next to the stairs and in the rod configuration room. Before the dark descent may commence, a final journal entry, for a while, shyly sits on a table, ready to say goodbye. It carries a harsh message of realization, however. 3 days after the last journal entry, the rising suspicion has escalated into a gruesome conclusion.
17th of July, 1839. How has this escaped me? They're all dead. Limbs scattered, heads split down the middle, their skin flayed as if boiled. I feel like I'm falling into myself. What's happening? Sir William Smith, Professor Taylor, now Dr. Tate. Is it following me? How can it not be? It's the damn thing I brought from Africa. Something is after me. I have no choice but to trust the Baron. He better know what he claims. If he is wrong, I suspect he'll regret it as well.
Daniel realizes that this is all not a coincidence. Everyone who recently offered Daniel some help had been grotesquely massacred, and Daniel sees himself and his newfound orb as the potential cause. It's not easy to tell what weighs more, his immense guilt or him fearing for his life. Daniel does not feel guilty for planning a trip to Brandenburg, as Alexander was not only clearly aware of the dangerous events that seemed to be going on, due to being familiar with the orbs himself, but he even offered for Daniel to come over in order to be protected. Daniel now feels that the Baron is the only one he can trust, and this trust will only grow stronger over time, at least for a while. Once all parts are in place, the machine may be revived. The elevator is now operational, in the nick of time. The environment quakes, a loud roar is emitted, and fleshy growth appears all over the place. The Guardian is done perceiving. It is now roaring more frequently and increases its pace, not unlike what happens much later in the game after Daniel becomes imprisoned. Leaving the machine room behind, everything goes dark. Similarly to when the cellar archives were flooded earlier. Once again, most candles are blown out. It's as if the Guardian stomps its gigantic invisible foot down right next to Daniel, causing him to black out for a moment. When Daniel comes to, there's fleshy residue left all around. The ambience has once again degraded, similarly to how the ambience is in some of the torture areas much later in the game. Everything has become so much darker, and there is a weak red glow. The rest of the back hall is now inaccessible, and Daniel needs to get out there the only way he can. You shouldn't use the elevator in the event of a Guardian on the loose, should you? All jokes aside, the elevator gives a slow descent into the forgotten dungeons. The doors allow for a peek into the floors, although it is so dark that not much can be seen, if anything at all. The light flickers on and off, something which is odd if it's a candlelight. Daniel loses his consciousness for a second, like mere moments ago, and like then, a loud roar is emitted while fleshy residue appear on the elevator shaft's walls. the elevator comes to a complete halt in between floors, hinting that the Guardian's residue has caught onto the elevator wire. It seems quite intentional, seeing as how the Guardian now has changed from lagging behind to become quite active. Intentional or not, the wire is dissolved, causing the elevator to free fall to the ground floor and out of the Guardian's grip. The elevator is no more. The fact that Daniel went through this all and can live to tell about it is a miracle. Look at that mess. Was his life spared for now? The mysterious Guardian may come off like an intelligent and even sometimes empathic entity, as will be brought up in particular in one of the game's endings. After all, Daniel intends to deal with a common enemy, a fellow thief of the orbs, but one who the Guardian has pursued for much, much longer.
Come, this way. What was that? Forgive me, I should have warned you. One of my responsibilities as a Baron is that of a prison warden. This is where criminals are locked up.
Like a dungeon?
Very much so. Come, don't linger.
What lies ahead is Brennenberg's dungeon, a place where a lot of murderers, pillagers, arsonists, and so on were being kept. The Baron is doing a great job to society by locking up the worst of criminals. Or were they really? Maybe we can take a closer look at what really is going on here as we progress through this dark and cold place. Much like the Guardian of the Orbs, Episode 7 does not reach this deep into the castle. For now, thank you for watching and have a pleasant night. Although, preferably not down here in a prison cell.